Welcome to the local campaign. Our debate today is in the riding of Kanata-Carleton. We're going to introduce the candidates to you in just a moment. I'll explain the rules for this debate. Each candidate will get an opening statement of 1 minute. The order for those opening statements has been drawn at random just a few minutes ago. They will each get a turn to make their remarks to you, and then we'll go to a series of questions about the important topics in Kanata-Carleton, across the National Capital Region, and right across this country in this election campaign. In each case, I'll start the debate by introducing a topic with a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will get 1 minute to answer that question. Then we'll open it up to debate from among all the candidates on that issue. And after that debate period is over, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was addressed, and that person will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. Each of the candidates will get at least one question, maybe two, as we kick off a series of these debates, and then we'll have closing statements, and those closing statements will be 60 seconds in length, and they'll be in the reverse order of the opening statements. The candidates don't know the questions. They do know that they're about important topics in this election campaign, but they will be hearing them for the first time as I introduce each topic. So let's meet the candidates. There are four of them here representing the riding of Kanata-Carleton. First is the Liberal candidate, Karen McCrimmon. The NDP candidate is John Hansen. Walter Pamic is the Conservative candidate, and the Green Party candidate is Andrew West. So we'll begin with their opening statements, and that's the order that they'll go in. So we'll start with Liberal candidate Karen McCrimmon. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some of it with us. My name is Karen McCrimmon. I'm the federal Liberal candidate in the riding of Kanata-Carleton. I'm a 31-year Canadian Forces veteran, and I've learned a lot having served my country in uniform, and that's one solid set of skills I can offer the people of Kanata-Carleton and the country as a whole. When I retired, I went back to school and I studied mediation and negotiation. So that's another solid set of skills that I can put to work for my community and my country. I believe that we need a different path than the one we are currently on as a country, one that's based on respect and balance and is really a reflection of who we are as a people. I know what public service is, and I'm offering to serve the people of Kanata-Carleton as your Member of Parliament. I look forward to meeting every one of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is the NDP candidate, John Hansen. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm John Hansen, the NDP candidate for Kanata-Carleton. I've lived in Kanata-Carleton for over 35 years. I'm an electrical engineer, having worked in the technology sector many years as an executive. As an MP, I will work to improve representation. One way is through regular town halls. I have a personal goal of improving the environment by making measurable progress on greenhouse gas emissions and habitat destruction through economically viable approaches, especially on the local level. Finally, I'm passionate about the economy. I'll work to create more jobs and better jobs in this community by using my experience to be the champion for business.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is the Conservative candidate, Walter Pamic. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Walter Pamic, the Conservative candidate in Kanata-Carleton. I've lived in the riding for almost 30 years. I own an electrical contracting business, so I have first-hand knowledge about what it takes to run a small business in this country. I offer voters real-life business and community experience that prepares me to be a vocal advocate as their Member of Parliament. As the son of immigrants who came to Canada with nothing, I value the opportunities that this country has to offer. I want to protect the enviable quality of life Canadians have worked so hard to achieve, so I want to protect low taxes, balanced budgets, income splitting, tax credits for single pensioners, and the $10,000 limit for the tax-free savings account. And I want our high-tech and small business sectors to focus on growth and job creation, not taxes and red tape. Thanks to Rogers and to my opponents for the chance to debate some very important issues here today.
Thank you. And finally, Andrew West, the Green Party candidate. Go ahead, you have 1 minute as well.
Yes, thank you. I too have experience with small business. I grew up in a small business family. We had a construction company. I also spent 10 years in the television industry working as a sole proprietor. I recently went back to school and completed my law degree at the University of Ottawa. I think it's important to tell you that every candidate here is very nice. They are very great people, and they will serve you proudly. However, they can't speak for you. They are whipped. Only the Green Party allows their candidates to vote the way that they want. So if you vote for a Liberal or an NDP or a Conservative, you're sending a stronger Liberal, Conservative, or NDP voice to Parliament Hill. If you vote Green, you're sending Kanata-Carleton to Parliament Hill. And we have a chance, based just on the houses that we've polled alone, our internal data, we're polling at 26%. 26%. This is a winnable riding. If you vote Green, I promise I will do you proud. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of the opening statements. I'm now going to direct a question to Karen McCrimmon, the Liberal candidate. She'll have 1 minute to answer that question, and then we'll open it up to all the candidates for some debate. Let's talk about transit and light rail in Ottawa. The federal government has indicated it will support Phase 2 of light rail, but it won't go all the way out to Kanata. I know that's not the federal government's decision, it's a city decision, but do you support a plan that doesn't bring light rail to the residents of Kanata?
I think there's a huge potential, especially with the Liberal Party commitment to infrastructure spending. The Liberal Party do believe in urban transit. We know that it improves people's daily quality of life with urban transit. And in order to make something like that happen, you need the federal government online, talking to the provincial government, talking to the municipal governments, and engaged in the community level. That is a strength of the Liberal Party. That is not a strength of our current government. So I'll know that I'll be out there advocating and I'll be there lobbying, and my voice will be heard inside the party. There will be decisions being made about where that infrastructure spending is going to happen. And it's up to us. If we have a federal Liberal government working with a provincial government, working with municipal governments, we can make it happen and we can move it up earlier. I'm convinced of it.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
Well, there's no doubt that this government, the Conservative government, has been very active in this community, Mark, and specifically when it comes to LRT. We funded Phase 1 to the tune of $600 million, and we funded Phase 2 to the tune of $1 billion. We haven't really seen the numbers yet for Phase 3, but we will be funding partners in Phase 3 also. I think it's always important to know that as long as we stay on course with our economic action plan, keeping taxes low, ensuring that we have a balanced budget that will continue with job creation, and that will ensure that we have the revenues in place so that we do have a great LRT program that takes us to Kanata and to the rest of the communities in the Ottawa-Carleton region. Thank you.
The NDP believes that cities are the best people to decide what infrastructure they need. And to that end, we have a commitment to fund the current commitments made by the current government, but in the future we will provide stable long-term funding so cities can decide where their transit should go and not leave it at the hands of politicians during election time. And that is a significant difference with the NDP.
We do have a deficit problem with infrastructure in this country to the tune of $350 billion. The Green Party wants to close this gap. We are big believers in having the LRT out to Kanata. Stage 2 does stop at Bayshore, as it was said, and that's going to happen in, I think, 7 or 8 years. Construction on Stage 3 is not scheduled to start to 2031, and that's simply because there's a lack of funding. The mayor told me himself, straight out, that they're just out of money for the LRT. We don't see the need to have that the construction to stop because as time goes on, prices are going to escalate. The way the Green Party is going to do this is twofold. One, we are going to implement 1% of GST towards cities for infrastructure. That's roughly $6.4 billion. Two, we're going to invest in an infrastructure bank. This will give the opportunity to use our capital to loan money to municipalities at a lower interest rate. Right now we're in a recession. We actually have to get out there and start making jobs. The LRT is needed. Even if you don't, it's someone that's not going to use the LRT, it's going to reduce traffic along the 417. It benefits everyone. We desperately need it. We also are actually going to plan to put in $6 million in the next few years into expanding via rail. Transit is very important to the Green Party, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that the LRT gets going and there's less cars on 417.
And this is the perfect time to invest in infrastructure. when I knock on people's doors and they said, do we really want to do this? Do we want to go into deficit in order to fund this infrastructure? And I said, consider Canada's like your house, right? You've got 20-year shingles on your house right now, and we're at year 22, 23. You know you're going to have to do that work. So right now, commodities prices are low, so the supplies are reasonably priced. Labor is available, so labor is a reasonable price. Borrowing the money is actually, the interest rates are low, so it makes sense to borrow that money now. And when I explain to people in those terms, would this be something you would go into debt for, to do these infrastructure improvements? And most people say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it also does jumpstart the economy, that creating those new jobs. So I think this is a wise thing to do, and our plan has been reviewed by independent economists who say it is a good thing to do at this point in time.
Well, I'd just like to say, debt is a dangerous thing. Yes, and by the way, the economy is improving. It's perhaps not improving as quickly as we like, but the U.S., the interest rates are going up. Yes, commodity prices are low, but the economy is improving. $600 billion in debt from the 1990s has resulted in $1 trillion in interest payments. So one needs to be careful. And if you look at Ontario, with the Ontario Liberals, we now have in Ontario the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world. And that comes home to roost. So being fiscally responsible is a very prudent thing. It's one of the things that the NDP cherishes and is known for.
I couldn't agree stronger with you. It seems my friend wants to borrow money that we still don't have, and I think that's a big problem. It's tax and spend, and we cannot afford this right now in our government and in our country. We have a fragile economy, and we need to ensure that we protect it.
I agree, and I think one of the ways to just go about doing that is to cut the $1.3 billion that the oil sands are receiving right now, and put that into the infrastructure. And back to the question at hand, not only would the LRT help get traffic downtown, it'll also help boost the local OC transport in Canada.
That's it for the debate portion of this segment. We'll go back to Karen McCrimmon. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic, which I'll remind you, we ended up talking a little bit about government finances, which is fine, but let's focus again on the question of whether or not Phase 2 of light rail ought to be going all the way out to Kanata as opposed to stopping at Bayshore and Algonquin.
Well, I think what the kind of infrastructure that the Liberal Party wants to invest in is infrastructure that has an impact on people's daily lives. And I think if we talk about urban transit, it doesn't matter what city you go to across the country, urban transit matters and will have an immediate impact on people's day-to-day lives. So this is why the Liberal Party does believe investments in urban transit.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic, and actually we'll pick up on this issue of government finances and balanced budgets versus running deficits. I was going to get to that later, but since we've started talking about it already, we might as well pick up there and continue. John Hansen, I'll ask you the question. There are critics of the NDP who are saying that in balancing the budget, you're also in promising to balance the budget, you're also introducing all kinds of new spending, and that you're either going to end up running deficits or raising taxes or having to cut in a whole bunch of places to pay for all of that. So how are you going to make it work?
Well, we've announced that we're going to have a modest tax increase, 2% on corporate taxes, and that still gives it under the average of what was under the current Harper government. When you charge taxes, you don't want to charge too much, but on the other hand, as every business person knows, you don't want to leave money on the table. Money was left on the table. So that is the biggest area where we're going to get the extra money for. We have allocated roughly $7 billion in extra spending, $4 billion in actual spending, and $3 billion in to pay down the debt. That is, to answer your question, is where we're going to get the money from.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
Well, we remain on track, Mark. As you know, last year we ran a surplus, a $1.9 billion surplus. The first quarter of this year, this government has a $5 billion surplus, and that's because of its low taxes, its outlook on the economy, ensuring that we create jobs, and jobs are the key. I'm a small business owner also in my community, and I've seen firsthand the benefits of lower taxation. The small business tax rate is at 9% or 11% right now. This government is proposing to take it down to 9%. I've seen my business be able to grow, be able to purchase the equipment that we need in order to hire more personnel who end up paying more taxes. It's almost counterintuitive, but when you do lower small business taxes, you create jobs. Both of my friends here have never met a tax they didn't like. They're proposing to raise taxes, and that is detrimental to our fragile economy.
Okay, this is when I have to. This is when I have
on-
to interrupt.
On Walter, I just got to say this. We're not going to raise small business taxes.
You just said you're going to raise it 2%.
No, I said corporate taxes. Small business taxes are going from 11 to 9. And not only are they going from 11 to 9, they're going to that next year. The NDP believes in small business, and part of our plan, part of the money that we've allocated to spend is actually a small business tax
And
reduction.
I have to follow on. This propaganda that the government is putting out there, that they have actually had a $5 billion surplus this year, is absolutely ridiculous. I read the Fiscal Monitor. I know what it says. What it said is that all of the assets that Canada owns is worth $5 billion more than it was last year. It is not a cash situation. This government has already borrowed $5.3 billion this year to pay its bills. So anybody telling you that they've created a surplus, it's not true. It is not. It is something based on our assets, all of our properties we own around the world, not about cash flow, and they have to borrow money in order to pay the bills.
And just on that, I'd actually like to point out that there's a lot of talk about balanced budget, and that seems to be the buzzword that's going around. But really, a bigger problem is the debt. We're paying $93 million in interest every single day on the debt. Can you imagine what we could use that money for otherwise? The government, if a government is elected, if the Green Party is elected to form government, here's how we would actually go about solving our debt problem. We'd cut subsidies, like to the oil sands, $1.3 billion. We would raise the corporate tax rate by the large business corporate tax rate. As Walter said, small businesses need a break. I'm part of small business. They spend money. I know that. So we want to give them a hand by lowering the small business tax rate by 2%. However, we would raise the corporate tax rate back to where it was just a few years ago. And here's why that's so important. They don't create jobs. Yes, small business cuts can create jobs because they need to invest that money. Large business corporations don't. When the tax rate went from 18% to 16%, 16.5% to 15% between 2010 and 2020, the bank accounts of the large corporations skyrocketed. The dead money, as Mark Carney called it, the former governor of Bank of Canada, said in 2009 there was $370 billion in bank accounts, $550 billion in 2012, and $630 billion in 2014. We can only imagine what it is right now. Don't believe this, that small business, that large corporations tax create jobs. And how the budget was balanced? Two things. One, they took $2 billion from the contingency fund, from a $3 billion contingency fund, to top it off to get it over that mark. As well, they also sold the GM shares, losing $3.5 billion from what they paid for it in 2009. If I had a financial advisor that did that, they would be fired. The current Conservative government is still pulling at about 33%. Seriously, don't fall for the smoke and mirrors. If you're interested in a balanced budget and cutting down the debt, look at the Green Party.
Just go to Finance Canada's website. They will show you that there was a $5.1 billion surplus for the first quarter. One only needs to look at the disaster that we see in Alberta under the Notley government and the disaster that is here in Ontario under the Liberal government right now. Our hydro rates are skyrocketing. We've seen small businesses exiting Alberta right now. That is what high taxation does, and that's not a policy that we are interested in. We are interested in lowering your taxes and creating jobs and ensuring that we have a balanced budget.
But it's
And
the large
going into
corporations, that's the issue.
$160 billion of additional debt
It's the large
is what
corporations, that's
Mr.
the
Harper
issue,
has
Walter.
added to our national debt. $160 billion. And now all of a sudden he wants to talk about being fiscally responsible. You have to look at what they've actually done.
Okay, that's time. We'll go back to John Hansen, the NDP candidate. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this.
Yes, balanced budgets. Conservatives and NDP agree. We need balanced budgets. The difference is our priorities are different. They want to give tax breaks to large corporations. We want to do better health care, help for seniors, help for the economy and small business tax reductions, and help for infrastructure. Those are our priorities. They are different from what the Conservatives are, but they are different, but within a balanced budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question, which will be for Walter Pamic, the Conservative candidate. The number one employer in the National Capital Region, of course, is the federal government. Your government has cut the number of jobs in the federal public service over the last few years. You're also at odds with the public sector unions over the issue of sick leave and other changes to benefits. There have also been there's also been this talk of how scientists are being muzzled and how federal public service morale is down. Has the Conservative government been a bad employer for the public service in Ottawa?
Thank you for that question, Mark. But you've asked me about 5 questions, and you're giving me 1 minute to answer all those questions. Listen, the public service in Canada has never been larger than it was underneath this government. We had a recession in 2008, 2009. There was some hiring that was done. Many of the jobs that have been lost have been done so by attrition. As far as scientists go being muzzled, there was over 4,000 peer-reviewed documents and articles that were put out by scientists. As an example, Environment Canada did 700 peer review articles last year. Fisheries and Oceans did over 500. So, I don't buy this assertion that federal scientists are being muzzled from that perspective, Mark. As far as sick day goes, this government is proposing a short-term and a long-term program that is fair for everyone. This current program is not fair for the young civil servants who have been there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, who just don't have enough sick days to get them to the long-term program.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on this issue.
Well, speaking about sick leave and sick days, it's not fair that you legislate it and then go ask people for going to the negotiating table. That is the very definition of unfair negotiation. You've actually gone out and with sick leave and asked the private industry to provide it, and it is such a large item that none of them even can make a bid at this point in time on that issue. So when we talk about sick leave, we talk about the public service, you have not been a really good employer. Your government has gone, and it's well known, is decision-based fact-making. In other words, you make a decision and then you find facts to support that. And I hear that constantly at the door from people that I speak to who work in the government, and they basically say, what numbers do you, to their management, what numbers do you need in order to fulfill your mandate in order to get your numbers out? So
well, we're creating a program, John, that is fair to our civil servants and also fair to the taxpayers. It strikes a great balance for both parties.
But it needs to be negotiated. That's what it comes down to. You have to build a relationship between the government and the public service. They're your expertise. They're your scientists. They're the ones who can give you the information you need in order to make solid decisions. But when you shut them out of the decision-making process, when you lay 2,000 of them off so they can't provide that input, and when you don't bother to even invite them to the negotiating table, then your relationship is really frayed. And that's the problem where we are right now. And that's what we need. We need a relationship with the public service based on respect, based on recognition of what they bring to the table, how they help our country on a day-to-day basis. And it needs to be really revamped. And we're going to have a huge challenge doing that once there's a Liberal government in place to rebuild that public service that has been really significantly damaged.
Well, this government respects the collective bargaining process, and it always has. The reality is that we have civil servants out there who are accumulating 18 sick days a year and who are banking them. And they ended up with 200, 250, 300 sick days, where the young civil servants coming in were not able to bridge themselves to the long-term program that was in place for them. So this is a fair system that respects taxpayers and respects civil servants also.
But where the issue is, though, is where some of these jobs are actually being lost to, or being transferred into contract work and part-time work. That leaves them in a position where they're precarious workers now with less job security, and that's happening all across this city. I've talked to it sounds cliche, but I have talked to many people at doors who are civil servants. One woman, she worked for StatsCan. She was forced out of her job just 1 year before her pension was to kick in. And that was part of a government incentive to push out jobs, to create this so-called attrition. With respect to the scientists, one of my classes when I was at the law school in Ottawa was working with the Eco-Justice Law Clinic, and we team with scientists there. I know that there have been cuts to science programs in this country. Money has been shifted into finding new ways for oil and gas extraction rather than, for example, finding ways to store renewable energy. The Green Party will put $3.5 billion, $75 million annually into funding science for Health Canada, Environment Canada, Parks Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans.
You're very right there, Andrew. We do transfer resources all the time from one department to another. So it's not uncommon for that to happen. We have to remember that Canada is ranked #1 in the G7 as far as its support for scientific research and development goes. So we have a great record with our scientists. And as I say, they are not being muzzled. They are free to speak.
Where did this money come
I
from?
can't believe that we're #1 as far as R&D in Canada, in
We'll have
the
to look
world.
that up, for
Yeah, that must be a very cherry-picked number, which your government is notorious for doing, is cherry-picking numbers and using them without the proper context.
One need only go to the OECD website.
Well, let's just talk about, when I was in private industry, one of the things that we cherished and we cared about was, we said every day, there goes the company leaving through the front doors, and we hope they come back the next day. And if they didn't come back, we wouldn't have the company. It wasn't the building, it wasn't the patents, it wasn't the manufacturing equipment, it was the building. And our institutions, our Canadian institutions that we rely on, are the people. And when you work systematically to break down their morale, you're not going to get the performance that we as Canadians have come to expect.
One quick thing I just actually say real quick, and this goes for me and for everyone on this panel. Whatever you hear, please look up. If I say it or anyone else, because sometimes they make a mistake, sometimes it's a complete fabrication. I'm not saying that's happening here, but whenever you hear something, always, always, always look it up and see how truthful the subject material is and the source where it comes from. It's important.
Okay, let's wrap up with 30 seconds. I asked you the question, Walter Pamic, so you get the final word on this.
Well, thank you, Mark. Let's face this, we are in tough economical times right now. We have a fragile economy, and this government is working very hard to correct that. I believe it's the only party that can actually handle our economy properly. Our public servants are an extremely important asset, as is any employee. In my business, my employees are my greatest asset. In our government, employees are our greatest asset. But we need to ensure that we find a balance between the public sector employees and the taxpayers. And I believe we have found that balance.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Andrew West, the Green Party candidate. I want to pick up on something you talked about in your opening statement about the role of members of Parliament. And when we get to the debate portion of this, I'd like to hear from each of you why voters in Kanata-Carleton should vote specifically for you, not just because of your party's platform, but because of what you're going to do as MPs. There's a sense that the role of MPs has been diminished greatly in the last couple of decades, not just related to one government or another, but it's been an overriding theme in Canadian politics lately. So what do we need to do to change that? How can we make MPs more powerful? And why should people in the riding of Kanata-Carleton not just vote based on party platforms and what's going on at the national level? Why should they think about the local candidate when they're voting?
That's a great question. Thank you. I once was at a firm in the United States that does elections for a business, and it is a big business down there. And they told me that the average voter in the United States spends about 10 minutes of their time examining who they're going to vote for locally. And that's part of the problem, is just the fact that they just don't pay attention of who your local candidate is. And that stems back from the 60s when they changed the rules, when the party leader got to sign on of who got to sign on to the nominations papers. And if they didn't follow the party lines, they wouldn't sign the nomination papers. So now they're whipped. Now they have to vote for the way the party tells them to, and this happens across the board. And it gets way past that. I mean, Conservatives now in committee meetings, they're actually beginning scripts about being told what to read. The Green Party wants to go back to how things was before the parties were whipped, when the candidate can speak on behalf of the constituent. So we don't have whipped votes. We can have town halls and vote for vote in Parliament the way the constituents feel is best.
It's open to everyone now on this.
In the Liberals' openness and transparency part of our platform, we talked a lot about what's happening inside government, the things that are being manipulated in committee, in Parliament, in the Senate, etc. And we've made a commitment to have more freedom for MPs to act. Paul Martin was the one who put the first proposal out there, and it came out in the early 2000s. 4 levels of being having MPs vote along party lines, and only when it was a confidence vote, a budget vote, something like that, would that extreme measure of party allegiance be required. There will be other votes where that will be more open to MPs, and I think the most important thing is, I want to be your member of Parliament, to be your voice. I'm not going to be the government's voice in Kanata-Carleton. I'm going to be the people of Kanata-Carleton's voice in government.
I totally respect Karen, and I believe she actually believes that, but it just won't happen. I mean, even Trudeau said that only MPs who believe in pro-choice could be allowed to run for Parliament, and he only stopped that back where there was public outcry from that.
What he said was, if you want to be an MP, if you want to be a candidate for the Liberal Party, you have to be prepared to vote pro-choice.
Exactly. There you go.
That's muzzling in the first
we are being honest. We are being honest with people.
But that's just it, Karen. I mean, you're not being honest to people. Honesty would be voting for what the people want, not what the leader tells you to want. That's true democracy. It says right in the Constitution, the only job for a member of Parliament is to represent your constituents. And we're the only party who's put down in the platform that we will represent our constituents by having town hall meetings, listening to what you have to say, and then voting on what we feel is best for our constituents. Every party, no matter what they say, the facts just don't back it up. Just look at the records.
If I could have a word here.
Go ahead.
I have said I will have regular town halls. And if you look at our party does not always vote in unison. Quite often we vote on matters independent of what the regular group does. And we don't admonish people like that. And as a matter of fact, our leader, Tom Mulcair, has said, you know, sometimes there is a difference of opinion. And Tom is well known for being a principled individual, because when he was member of Parliament in the Quebec Parliament, he refused to sign the order which would allow condo development in a provincial park. He is a very principle-based person.
That's being challenged. Did you know that, right?
I will also be
John,
that same principle-based person.
I want an example for John. John, when we were at the Canada Muslim Association debate, you said that we were talking about Bill C-51. Remember that?
I remember.
I said that NDP votes are whipped, and you said that the caucus voted, I think 85% of the caucus of NDP voted for Bill C-51, and another 15% voted against it.
I did not give numbers.
No, you said that.
No.
Yeah, but there are some members of the caucus then that weren't for Bill C-51. Is that right?
You know what? We agree as a caucus, and we stand together.
There you go.
And
caucus votes do not show up in the Hansards. The Speaker of the House does not go up afterwards and say, hey, okay, we see the vote in the House. Now can we see what will happen in the caucus? So there were members of the New Democratic Party that were against, from what John is saying, they were against Bill C-51, and they all voted for Bill C-51. Check the Hansards. There were 5 NDP people that were left out.
Aren't you getting just a little bit tired of hearing people, of listening to people attacking each other? Aren't you? I know I am. I've just about had enough. Now, we have to have a way to engage each other. But I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. And I think that's what you need. That's the question you need to ask. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell, that's the answer I gave you is our commitment, what we are going to do. And we need to elevate the level of discussion away from this attacks and constant criticism. This is not the way to move a country forward.
Well, I don't see this as being an attack. I see this being a very robust debate. There's no elevating of voices. There are people sharing ideas, sharing discussions. You know, that's just a classic example of trying to muzzle, the same way that they were muzzled on the vote on the free choice. And they were told that they would, and this was on the record, Karen. Justin said you will either be pro-choice or you will not be a member of parliament. You will not have your nomination paper signed.
You are allowed to be pro-choice. You are allowed. But it is part of our party's platform. The members of our party voted that we will be a pro-choice party. The members of the party, not the caucus, not the leadership, the members of the party voted that we would be a pro-choice party.
And there were many Liberals that were upset about that because
yes,
that wasn't
but it was the party's overwhelming majority. We are just saying, being honest with people, but that's the kind of party that we are.
Okay, that's time. I'll go back to Andrew West for the final 30 seconds on this topic. Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple comments just based on what Karen said. When the party voted to be a pro-choice party, that still is, you know, a muzzle on what is best for the constituents. The Green Party allows its members to have some disagreements with the party platform. That's because we want our MPs to vote the way we feel is best for our constituents. And as for members of Parliament voting the same way, I guarantee you it's only the Green Party that is allowing their MPs to vote the way they feel is best for their constituents.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next topic now, and I'm going to direct a question to the Liberal candidate, Karen McCrimmon. Your party is talking a lot about investing in creating jobs, but at the same time, you're talking about increasing payroll taxes, which your opponents are saying would kill jobs. So how will you be able to put more money into things like the Canada Pension Plan if the result is that businesses are saying they don't want to see that happen and it's going to mean they hire fewer people?
Oh, you're talking about an extension to CPP. Is that what you're talking
Expanding
about?
the CPP benefits?
Well, I think that we do need an extension to CPP, and we need to make it more open so that more people can contribute and be a part of CPP. Right now, if we look at what the numbers are, somewhere 20 to 25 years from now, if we don't change something about how our pension plan works, we're going to have a whole lot of senior citizens living in poverty. We can see it coming. All the reports are there. So what the government and what we're trying to do is to say, okay, we know it's going to happen 20 years from now, so why don't we start something now so that we don't end up in a crisis? Get the people who want to join CPP, give them homemakers, okay, independent business people who want to contribute to CPP so they can have a secure retirement. I think that's the way to go. We need those long-term plans.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
We're not talking about raising payroll taxes, Mark?
Yeah, well, I think the premise of the question was along the lines of if you're going to expand CPP benefits, you're going to have to get more money from employees and employers to fund that, and business people have said that that's an increase in payroll taxes that will mean they hire fewer people.
Well, definitely. I mean, I see it firsthand in my business on a regular basis. Every single time that you raise any sort of a payroll tax whatsoever, you end up decreasing jobs. So there has to be a very, very balanced approach taken to this, and that's one that this government has taken. You know, we've lowered taxes, we've balanced the budget, and that in turn has allowed us to employ more people in our economy who end up paying more taxes. So it's a great way of funding that program.
I find it very interesting that you say contributing to your pension, saving for your pension is a tax. People have to save.
It's a government deduction.
People have to save for pensions one way or the other. The single best way to save is the Canada Pension Plan. It's the gold standard of pension plans. It's a defined benefit, and it's backed by the Government of Canada. No other pension plan, you know, if you have a Sun Life pension, it may be good, but it's not as good as the CPP. And we believe that the CPP should be enhanced. It will cause more employee and employer contributions, but that can be phased in over time. It doesn't have to be a shock to the system. And quite frankly, you know,
it will be a shock to the system.
Most people would prefer to put their money in a CPP than, let's say, a business-oriented plan that GM or somebody might have. Because they know that they're going to be there when they retire, or Nortel for that matter.
Okay, who's next?
Yes, well, We do have an issue. I mean, this Canada pension plan is pretty secure right now. I mean, we acknowledge that. I mean, I think the government said it's secure for the next 70 years, which is great. But I mean, at this point in time, and we have an aging population, and we have younger people who have more and more accumulating more debt, we would like to look at expanding the Canada pension plan. We would like to look at it simply because it isn't a tax. It does come back to you at the end. This is registered. This is money that you're going to be used for your savings down the road. What we're just looking at is just how we can make sure that you retire comfortably, to make sure that no one retires in poverty. There's 600,000 seniors in poverty in Canada right now. That's too much. So we want to look at a plan that will make sure that you, even at a young age, start planning now to make sure that you are secure for your retirement. We think long-term, not short-term. Sure, short-term tax cuts might look good now, but we need to think about what's going to happen for generations, our next generation, and a generation after that, and 7 generations from now.
And the face of poverty in Canada is older female, because they didn't have the opportunity to contribute to a pension plan. And when their partner passes away, they may only get, if he was lucky enough to get a CPP pension, she'll only get part of it. So this is an issue. As we live longer, and we have to address the requirement for people to have the means to retire in security.
When we talk about balanced budgets, we're always very focused on that. And when we don't have proper pensions, that's a social deficit that we're creating. And it's actually going to be an incumbent upon future generations to pay for that in higher social costs one way or another. So saving for retirement today and making it the best possible plan that could be helps all Canadians, and it helps our social deficit.
I think there's no doubt that we have to continue to help people, especially those who need it. But as I go around my riding of Kanata-Carleton, I have met with hundreds, thousands it seems, of seniors. I've been to many of the seniors' residences throughout Canada, the seniors' neighborhoods. And you know what? Many of them are doing very, very well. I'm actually quite impressed, not only by how well they're doing economically, but by how well they are doing also socially. They're exercising more, they're taking better care of themselves. But at the end of the day, any increase in payroll taxes is going to be a job killer, which is going to take away from our tax base, and this is not an area that we believe in.
Again, we're looking at it as the fact that it's not something that's going to attack jobs right now. First off, we're just going to look at the idea of it. But this is an investment in people's future. It's not meant to hurt companies at this time around. It's not a tax. It comes back to you when you want to retire. And another way that we can help offset all those costs, and I'm not going to share if we're getting into healthcare talk or not, but one thing that we want to do is implement a pharmacare plan which costs $1 billion, and it's going to save Canadians $11 billion. That's another way that they can offset their costs now so they can start plan better for their retirements of the future.
There's also no doubt that this government bringing in income splitting for seniors has been a tremendous boon for them. I met a senior the other day that told me that they have $6,000 a year that they're...
No more.
You can thank this government for that.
Enough.
Okay, we'll stop there. Karen McCrimmon, I asked you the original question, so you've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this.
It is about, we need some long-term plans. That's the problem. All we've been doing lately is going from election to election. That's why nothing's planned more than 4 or 5 years out. We can see what the future holds. We know that if we don't do anything at all, we are going to have people living in poverty, and that's not what we want. So we need people who have the experience, strategy, long-term planning, and who can actually make these things happen for Canadians. That's what we're committing to do.
Okay. Next question is to John Hansen, the NDP candidate. Let's talk about health care. Your party is talking about increasing the annual increases that would be going towards the provinces, the transfer payments to the provinces, back to the levels that they were a few years ago. At the same time, you're also talking about a number of different ways that you're going to invest in healthcare, things like a pharmacare program, that type of thing. So are those included in the funding increase, in the transfer payments, or is there an overall increase in the money that you're going to provide to the provinces for the things they're already doing, plus all of these new investments, or is that all one envelope?
We have issued our budget, and the money, all the money is in that budget, including money that we're going to give to the provinces. There's roughly a $7 billion increase in spending. $3 billion is not actually spending. It will go to deficit reduction or contingency plan. Of the $4 billion, about a third of that is health care, a third of that is infrastructure, and a third of that is job creation. So we are going to improve health care, and we're also going to work towards improving pharmacare by doing group purchases and working to that. We're not ready to announce a complete pharmacare program, but we will work to improve Canadians' access to medicine over the mandate.
Okay, it's open to everybody now on the subject of health care.
I think this government has done an exceptional job in healthcare funding. If you remember, we inherited the Health Canada Act, and they raised funding by 6% year over year from 2006 to 2014. It was a 10-year plan. We have continued funding it at that same level, and it seems that there are always challenges, and we keep throwing more money at it, and I'm not sure that that's really alleviating any of the wait times that we're seeing in the provinces. I'd like to see a lot more done by the provinces with the monies that they're receiving. There are efficiencies, I'm sure, that they can find. And I hope
Your
that they're able
government
to.
always talks about efficiencies, and there's always efficiencies to be found. But
There are.
Yes, by not paying people, by doing a lot of things, not spending money is one way to find efficiencies.
Well, this
But
Liberal
your
government provincially is starving.
Your government has not shown any leadership on the health file. You have not had any federal provincial conferences. Your own Conservative member of Parliament, provincial parliament in our riding, is siding with the nurses about the cuts that are currently taking place, partially induced by your federal government not showing any leadership on the issue.
Well, that's not true.
Okay,
He's siding on behalf of the nurses. His wife and his 3 daughters happen to be nurses, John, and he's siding against the Kathleen Wynne government that is failing to put the resources that they're being given by this federal government into healthcare.
Exactly.
And if I have to correct something. The healthcare accord that was signed with Paul Martin and all the provinces lasted 10 years and then expired. That was a commitment for 6% annual increase in healthcare spending. What's happened now has not been negotiated with the provinces. It was an imposition by this government, and those increases have been reduced to strictly inflation.
No,
So-
they're at 6%, Karen, and at 2017 they're going to the rate of inflation with a minimum of 3%.
But that's where there's a bit of a
Okay,
problem.
so
I'll get back to that in a second.
there is
Just
a
always wanna-
reduction.
I'll
There
get back
is
to
a reduction
No,
in the
it's
amount of
6%.
money.
But the problem when it gets tied to the GDP of the provinces is that it's going to disproportionately favor the wealthier provinces over the provinces that aren't as having a strong year with the GDP, and they're probably the provinces that need the most help when it comes to the transfer payments. Now, what the Green Party would want to do to make sure that everyone is living, comfortably with healthcare respects, one is we're for preventative first and foremost. So one thing that we want to do is start a guaranteed livable income to get rid of all the messy tax credits and subsidies that currently exist, to make sure that people who need money to buy food and water and shelter actually have that. It's common for people who it's cheaper for someone to pay for social housing. It's like $25 a day for a bed, rather than $600 for a psychiatric bed in a hospital where some of these people who are homeless end up. I talked about expanding the Canada Pension Plan. That's something we want to look at. We're the only party implementing or suggesting we have a federally funded pharmacare program. We're the only.
No, you're not.
Yes, fully funded pharmacare program. You just said earlier that you're not. You're looking into it.
Well,
we are suggesting we actually have it, and that's based on
If
the
you get elected.
Canadian Medical Association Journal, who is suggesting that this is how it's going to cost $1 billion, and conservatively save Canadians $11 billion. And we are the only country that has a universal health plan that doesn't have a pharmacare plan. Finally, we want to establish a Council of Canadians, and this expands on the Council of Federations, to work with the provinces and also including the Prime Minister and Aboriginal leaders to see how they could best use their transfer payments and what resources that they further need to cut down on wait time and to make sure that funding is there for the hospitals and local health clinics that need it. And finally, just one last thing, because I may not get another time to jump in. One other thing that's important to me is rural healthcare. I grew up in a rural community, and when I go back and visit my mom, I literally see a sign that says healthcare, doctors wanted. So we actually want to invest in infrastructure, put 1% of the GST, which is $6.4 billion, towards municipalities to help fund infrastructure, to even just get high-speed rail out to some of these small communities, just in case doctors want to come in downtown and watch an NHL hockey game, for example. They should be able to, but we need to make it as convenient as possible for smaller towns to have the doctors that they desperately need.
So we have a federal government right now who does not believe that they have any responsibility in terms of health care. And I think that's wrong. I think it's very short-sighted. There's a lot that the federal government can do, and the Liberal Party has put forth some of these ideas. If you look, it's almost as if the federal government should be health care, keeping people healthy, preventive issues, long-term planning, innovation in health care, things like that. And leave the sickness care to the provinces. But if you look at some of the health trends that we are facing, the aging of our population, the increased incidence of chronic diseases that people have to live with for longer times during their life, we need some innovation in healthcare. We need some preventative work with healthcare to keep people happy and to keep them active and not allow them to become isolated. It's hard in Canada in the wintertime. Canada in the winter is hard on people. So we need to understand that healthcare just doesn't stand alone. It also results from what our social interactions are with each other, the investments we make in social infrastructure, long-term care, hospitals, etc. So we need a comprehensive plan in order to keep Canadians healthy.
And I'm glad that you're going to talk about a comprehensive plan. I've heard a lot of generalities, but no specifics. And when we talk, we really need to talk about specifics. And the NDP will do a number of things, and we've announced we will help seniors provide seniors with home care. We will help fill the gap for the 5 million Canadians that don't have a doctor, and we will work on mental health issues for children, because when children get mental health when they're young, we can do something about it. When they're older, their brains are wired.
Okay, so you were going to get the last 30 seconds on this, so I just let you go there. And are you okay if that's your final word on the subject?
I'll give me 15 seconds.
Sure.
The NDP plan, it's within a balanced budget. What I just spoke about is within our commitment to have a balanced budget for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for your participation in that discussion. That brings us to the end of the debate topics. We're now going to have the closing statements. Once again, each of these will be 1 minute in length, and they'll be in the reverse order of the opening statements. So we're going to start with the Green Party candidate, Andrew West. Go ahead. You've got 1 minute.
Thank you. I know that a lot of people out there haven't thought much about the Green Party, but simply because they've probably been told once that it might be a wasted vote, or you're hearing, this debate about vote splitting. Vote splitting is not the issue. Vote abandonment is the issue. The Green Party wins in ridings where vote turnout is high. It happened with Elizabeth May, it happened with Andrew Weaver in BC, it happened to David Kuhn in New Brunswick, and Peter Bevan-Baper in Prince Edward Island. If you look up at Google which leaders are the most trending, which leaders are most searched in each riding, there's 4 where the Green Party is leading in Canada. One is Saanich Gulf Islands. One is out in Prince Edward Island, close to where Peter Bevan-Baker lived. Another is Kanata-Carleton. This is a winnable riding, and if we get enough seats in Parliament, we could hold the balance of power in a minority government, and they would have to come to us to get the legislation passed.
That's time.
So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Next up is Walter Pamic, the Conservative candidate. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Mark. Don't let my friends' doom and gloom scare you. Canada has done well since the 2008 recession. We have ranked as the most admired country in the entire world. We have the wealthiest middle class of any country in the world, and we've created 1.3 million net new jobs. But the global and Canadian economies continue to be fragile. Now is not the time to be taking any risks with political parties that intend to massively increase spending, raise taxes, run deficits, introduce carbon tax, and impede the natural resources development that is vital to our economical well-being. Their plans will kill jobs. Only the Conservative Party has the right plan to strengthen and grow Canada's economy. That plan includes keeping taxes low, balanced budgets, programs like income splitting for families and seniors, and ongoing support for small businesses, which are the job creation engine of our country. On October 19th, vote for me, Walter Pamic. I am your Conservative voice in Kanata-Carleton. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, John Hansen, who is the NDP candidate. Go ahead.
An NDP government will work to improve health services, infrastructure, support for veterans, and work to improve our economy, all within the framework of a balanced budget. We will restore respect for the public service and the important work that they do for all Canadians. The NDP and Tom Mulcair have a plan. As your MP, I will work with the NDP on Parliament Hill, but I will work for the people of Kanata-Carleton. As MP, I will significantly improve representation through regular town halls and a walk-in hours on my constituency office. I will have a personal goal of improving the environment. I want to make measurable progress on greenhouse gas and habitat destruction issues, but through practical, economically viable approaches. I will create more and better jobs by using my experience to be the champion for business in this community.
Okay, thank you. Finally, the closing statement from Karen McCrimmon, the Liberal candidate.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate the time. You know, you can choose to vote for a lot of things, but I want you to vote for something. You can vote for a leader, you can vote for a party, you can vote for a platform, you can vote for a policy plank. But here's something else you can vote for. You can vote for change. I believe that we need a change in the direction that our country is going in. I want to be proud of the legacy that I leave our children. And right now, that's a pretty tough thing to do. So I'm asking for your vote come the 19th of October or beforehand. Vote for change. Vote for a new kind of future for Canada. I'll be there to serve the people of Kanata-Carleton. I'll be accessible. I'll be your advocate, your ally, and your voice. Everyone in that riding deserves someone to be their voice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates for participating in our debate in the riding of Kanata-Carleton. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the local campaign. Good night.